Well, you know how angry I get about people wasting our money. And I get even angrier, if that's possible, when I realize that American taxpayer dollars have been poured into a foreign nation only to have that nation maybe decide they'd like to keep our stuff that we've built, but they're getting rid of our troops. So, admittedly, in this case, we're talking about a country that has been under constant threat of overturning of the government, and they've had coups, and they're now having a military junta, if you will, but it still goes to the heart of our intelligence. And I'm not talking about intelligence like spycraft. I'm talking about the intelligence that we possess when we make decisions about whether or not we're going to build a base here or there, whether or not we're going to have military intervention here or there, and specifically how we can accomplish our strategic goals and objectives while still advancing America's interests abroad and assisting countries in our partnerships with them. So that's not easily done. We're talking about human beings, so there'll always be difficulties. But this is a straight up blast of incompetence that we're dealing with here. So I'm talking about the United States now beginning to pull out our military equipment and personnel from Niger. This is happening starting last Friday, actually. We were waiting months for the ruling military junta to approve U.S. military flights into the country, and U.S. DoD and Department of National Defense of the Republic of Niger have made a joint announcement that those talks have come to an end, and we will now be withdrawing everything, equipment, material, and people by a withdrawal deadline of September 15th. I reported on this before because the Chinese military had actually sent hundreds of troops to Niger and were housing them and platforming them out of an aircraft hangar on the military base that we built there. We spent $100 million to build a base there for our troops to stage out of to assist the nation state of Niger with a lot of difficulties that they were having in the region. So now that we've decided to leave, our first priority is to remove sensitive equipment from Niger. And we're now able to look at the flight tracking websites if you're interested. If you're tired of doom scrolling on Instagram, you can watch our withdrawal using flight tracking websites, which show that U.S. C-17 cargo aircraft are now en route to the Nigerian capital of Niamey on Friday. This was last Friday. So much of the U.S. military and equipment has been at Niamey at what's known as Base 101. And a source from the U.S. military has now confirmed to major news organizations that this flight is the beginning of the withdrawal of military equipment. Some personnel will also return with that equipment on that originating flight. So last month, the U.S. and Niger reached this agreement for the withdrawal of American forces. They gave us 4 months to pull approximately 1,000 people and the accompanying military equipment from the West African nation. Now, what were we doing there? Well, Niger was a central hub from which the U.S. carried out surveillance of violent extremist groups in the region, including the use of MQ-9 Reaper drones. We also trained Nigerian troops on the Reaper drones. But there was a coup last July, and that brought a halt to all of the training missions that we were engaged in. So the relationship between the U.S. and the military junta grew increasingly strained as the Biden administration officials called for a free and clear path to elections. So we have a base there. We have to deal with these people. We know they're not democratically minded. They don't have a representative republic there or a constitution. You're talking about a group of people who have overthrown the government, and our primary concern was whether or not they had free and clear elections. Now we lose the use of a base that we put there and $100 million of American hard-earned, squeezed out of your extra, except the government gets their money first, dollars. And what's upsetting about this is that the U.S. was also forced to wait for this junta to approve flight clearances for the withdrawal. So you have 4 months of limbo for 1,000 troops in the area. Meanwhile, CCP troops are in a hangar just across the flight line from them, staging and training and learning all about our base. So here's the underlying issue that the news stories that I read all over the internet, everyone's reporting on this. It's a major news story. But no one's talking about the fact that U.S. military bases are built by American engineers. They're designed by American engineers, and they have a certain style to them. They're American in their orientation because we use a air support system for all of our military interventions. If we go wage a war somewhere, we provide air support to ground troops. That's our way of doing things. Now, that's been called into question as to whether or not that's going to be the future of modern 21st century warfare. That's a whole nother segment we could do on another day, even with a guest perhaps. But that is the current status of how we engage them with our enemies. If you look at that, then you know that our bases are set up a certain way. The Chinese are always looking for ways to learn about the way that we think and the way that we operate, especially militarily, and of course, how we intersect our technology and the creativity of the military mind to wage war. They have been attempting intrusions into U.S. military bases on American soil, and they have bought up farmland near American military bases because they want to spy and learn how we work our military. It's not enough for them to steal the intellectual property and to build their jets based off of our platforms and to steal our technology from the tech sector and to send their people here to get educated in our universities and to steal our scientific innovations. They have to actually steal the way the bases are built. If they could learn how the bases are built, they could understand how our troops operate on a day-to-day basis. If they can understand that, it gives them far better insight into how they could wage war against us in the event that they move on their aspiration of taking Taiwan back into their larger country, the CCP, and if we were to respond to that. So they now will have access to a fully functional U.S. military base that was recently stood up in Niger, and they couldn't be happier about it. And this is happening under the Biden administration. The first priority for the Department of Defense and the Biden administration should have been to maintain command and control of that base or to destroy it, not to leave it for Niger and the CCP. Their new partnership represents a clear and present danger to our U.S. military control system. This is not to be allowed. But of course, if you have a man who doesn't know whether he's standing or sitting, if you have a man who's not sure what stage he's on or what state he's in or what office he's running for, President Biden has been caught a couple of times during this campaign talking about running for U.S. Senate or being the vice president. He is not fit to run this country. And this is another mistake we will grow to regret in the ensuing years. I'm disgusted by it. Turning now to another mistake on behalf of the Biden administration, you have our money that is going to support Ukrainians being used to back an NGO that's targeting Americans with an enemies list. This is a media non-governmental organization called texty.org.ua, which has compiled a list of supposed enemies of Ukraine that are in the United States. This raises concerns about U.S. taxpayer dollars being used to target American citizens and organizations here. This happened on June 6th, that it became public that texty.org.ua published an article listing American opponents to Ukraine aid, accusing them of repeating Kremlin propaganda and blaming those Americans for recent Ukrainian battlefield setbacks. Texty.org.ua is founded by Anatoly Bondarenko. It's linked to the U.S. State Department's Tech Camp program, which trains foreign journalists, NGOs, and activists in media skills. So prominent figures on the list, I'll tell you. Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, who's a U.S. Senator, Charlie Kirk, he's actually on our network here, and others. Organizations listed, the American Conservative and its writers. So if you look at this, it's deeply concerning that American taxpayer dollars are being used by some freak organization overseas to create a target list that could endanger the lives of American citizens abroad. This should be stopped immediately. Isn't this why we have a CIA? I have questions, and as a taxpayer, we should have answers immediately given to us by our government. Up next, who secretly scores your driving? Did you know your driving is being scored? Do you hit the brakes? Do you drive a little over the speed limit? How much will that scoring impact your insurance rates? I'll tell you more up next on Stacey Washington Now.